Good morning. I hope you're doing well. We're doing good today? Good. Well, the book of 1 Samuel introduces one of the primary characters of the Old Testament, the prophet named Samuel. It introduces him with an ominous line. It starts like this. In those days, the word of the Lord was rare, and there were not many visions. And the people of God were due for a move. The people of God were ready for God to do something. And he introduces his character Samuel into the picture, and he raises him up, and he sends him off into doing. And with those words in the birth of this prophet, the Old Testament goes off with a bang. The second big move of the narrative flow of the Old Testament happens. King Saul, King David, Jerusalem as the center of Israel's life, the temple, all of it goes on because of what happens after these words. When he introduces this person named Samuel, and God says, I'm ready to do something big. And then the whole flow of the story goes, and the pages of the Old Testament go flying by, and by the time the Old Testament ends, the people of God have been taken away from Israel and brought back into Israel. The walls of Jerusalem have been destroyed and have been built back up, and the minor prophets were sent in there to write letters to the people, and the prophet Malachi was putting his final touches on his book, and then the Old Testament comes to a close. And for you and me, it's just a little turn of a page. And we see the New Testament. Matthew, here's how Jesus was born. And off the New Testament goes. But for the people of God, it was not just the turn of a page. They were introduced to what is known as the intertestamental period. The time between the testaments. And this was a massive amount of history. The Greek Empire rose to its prominence and had its entire golden age and waned in its influence in this stretch of time. The Roman Empire rose to its prominence, and the world was shaking, and the map was shifting, and the world was changing. It was on the move. And do you know what they say about this time in history? You know what they call it for Israel? They don't call it, oh, the words were just rare. You know what they say? 400 years of silence. No prophets from God, no new books of the Bible, no new messages. Life was just normal. Silence from God. And the world was shaking. The world was shifting. The Greek Empire sent its language and its culture across the known world. And everyone spoke Greek. The Roman roads crawled across the map like a spider web. Everyone traveled on them. And the people of God were sitting there in silence for 400 years. And then one day, a wild man with strange clothes shows up. And he stands at the banks of the Jordan River. And he holds out his arms and he says, prepare the way for the Lord. Make a straight path for him. And with those words, the 400 years of silence were shattered. God spoke again. He sent a prophet into the world. He was a man, they say he came in the spirit of Elijah. He was he was the final in a long line of Old Testament prophets that came throughout the days. And if you read the New Testament, he's the only guy in the New Testament that actually has an Old Testament feel about him. He looks and feels just like the Old Testament guys, except he's in the New Testament. And his job was to go before the Messiah. His job was to come and say, this man's coming. And he's not like the Old Testament guys who goes, repent because there's a king coming in the future. Repent, there's a future kingdom coming. No, he's going, the king is coming now. So you had better repent now. And this man, Jesus Christ, says this about him. I tell you, among those born of woman, there is no one greater than John the Baptist. Jesus Christ said, of all the people that figured out how to live this life by their own power, their own morality, their own ability, he's the best there ever was. That is a massive compliment to hear from Jesus Christ. And yet, when they would come to him, They would say, "Are you the Messiah?" He'd go, "No." "Are you Elijah?" He'd go, "No." "Are you one of those Old Testament prophets?" "No." They eventually ran out of questions to ask him. They go, then who are you? And he goes, "I'm just the man in the wilderness, screaming to anyone who will listen, 'Prepare the way for the Lord.'" And he was a powerful man. He was a successful man. He was great in many ways. And yet, he lived his entire life in the shadow of Jesus. Everything he did was overshadowed by Jesus. He preached to crowds and baptized many people. Jesus did it better. Jesus actually fed these people with miracles. He died for his faith and his preaching. Do I have to tell you? Jesus did it better. Jesus rose from the dead and conquered death and the grave and sin once and for all. And we're even going to find out that his story starts with a miraculous birth that is only ever read because we're celebrating someone else's miraculous birth, because Jesus did that better. He had the second best birth story in the Bible. Can you believe it? Isn't that kind of frustrating? Have you ever had someone insult you by saying you're the second worst person on the face of the earth? You go, "Wait, time out. Who's this other guy that's worse than me?" You know what I mean? Like, that's a worse insult. At least let me be the worst person, you know? And that's what John is. He's the second best. He's in the shadow all the time. And the way that story starts is with a birth story. I already told you the world stood in silence. God was not sending prophets. There was no one speaking. No new books of the Bible were being written. And yet, by the way, if you're interested in this journey with us, going through the life of John the Baptist, open up to Luke chapter 1 is where we're going to be. And we got a lot of scripture, but that's okay because we like the Bible. Amen. Okay, anyways. That was your part. Okay, whatever. All right, so no, there were no messages. It was still the 400 years of silence, but there were rumors popping up. There were rumors of things happening. And because they were living in this 400 years of silence, and because they're just people like you and I are people, the world fell into its rhythm like you and I do. And sometimes we read the Bible and we think everybody on earth had their own time where God spoke to them out loud to where they could hear and everyone else could hear and go, "Wow, that was my moment to hear from God." But that wasn't the case. Often we read the Bible and we think miracles were just hiding around every corner and everyone's just going, "Man, maybe this is my day to get my miracle." And that wasn't the case. Always the miracles stood out. That's why people noticed them. And today we're going to find that these people lived their lives in the same oxygen-rich, gravity-filled locations that you and I do. And they go in their day-to-day lives. And here in this silence, we hear this, verse 5. "In the time of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah, who belonged to the priestly division of Abijah. And his wife, Elizabeth, was also a descendant of Aaron. And both of them were righteous in the sight of God. They observed all the Lord's commands and the decrees blamelessly. But they were childless, because Elizabeth had not yet been able to conceive, and now they were very old." Just like you and me, going through our lives. And yet we see that these people have lived righteous in the sight of God. They are going through their weekly routines. They go to church every Sunday like we did. They go to the temple and the synagogue. They go into worship. They come out to worship. And even though they weren't hearing God speak audibly to them, they still worshiped like God was there because God is there. God is faithful and He is true and He's worth worshiping. And they would go and they would do this. And yet we also see that these righteous people in the Bible also carried with them a sadness that went everywhere they went. They couldn't have a kid. They missed their chance to have a kid, and now they're too old to have a kid, and this is where they are. This is their life. And yet, even though they've gone very up in age, they are still living righteous lives. And once, in verse 8, when Zachariah's division was on duty, he was serving as the priest before God. He was chosen by lot according to the custom of the priesthood, which means they're just doing everything normal because that's how life is. Life's normal. They were not expecting a miracle on this day. They were not expecting anything strange to happen in the temple. This is all normal. And he went into the temple to of the Lord to burn incense. And when the time came for burning incense, all were assembled outside, and they were worshiping outside the temple. So it's this guy's turn. They cast lots. That's how they do it. It's his turn, so he goes in. And they're all worshiping outside, and they're ready for things to happen. And he doesn't come back out. And here's a lesson for us. Are you ready? The first sermon we're going to preach on the life of John the Baptist is actually a sermon about his parents. And even though they've not lived a life where special treatment has been given to them by God, they have not lived a life where everything has worked out perfectly easily for them, they still have decided to follow God and live righteous according to His ways, and they're going about their life, and that should be a lesson to us. That as we live and raise our kids and run our families, we should be aiming for being righteous in front of God. Because the religious lives of our homes affect the religious lives of our kids. Jesus is going to say about their son that they're going to raise, he's the best man I've ever seen. And I think these two people have something to do with that. When God chose a house for his son to live in, when he was sending Jesus to earth, he did not just go find some train wreck. He found two people with noble faiths who were willing to do what's right in the face of all sorts of mockery and angst and anger and people looking at them sideways forever. He found a good home for his kid to be raised in. And because the spiritual lives of our homes affect the spiritual lives of our kids. But then on this day, verse 11, the angel of the Lord appeared to him standing at the right side of the altar. The silence is broken. God's speaking to his people again. And it's happening, of all people, to Zechariah. And yet, all that's going to leave this room are rumors. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why. The angel says, listen, do not be afraid. Your prayer has been answered. Great, that's awesome. I love to know that God answers prayers. Who wants to believe that God answers prayers? I hope everyone's right. Yes, we all believe it, even though our arms are not warmed up, so we're not raising our hands. That's okay. But he says, here's your prayer. You've been answering it. What's the prayer? They're very old. They haven't had kids. What are they still praying about? Your wife Elizabeth will bear a son, and you will call him John. Remember that name, John. Let's look at the verse real quick. That's verse 13. That's going to become an issue later. But I want you to think about how early this angel says the name John in this passage. You will name your son John. And he will be a joy and a delight to you. And many will rejoice because of his birth. And for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. And he will go before the Lord, and in the spirit and the power of Elijah, to turn the hearts of parents back to their children, and the disobedient back to the wisdom of righteousness. And he will make ready a people prepared for the Lord. This is amazing news, right? The silence is broken. God's speaking to his people again. And of all people, it's happening to Zechariah. Because God, you have to write this down. Remember forever, because God has big plans. God is sending this man into the world with big plans in mind. He is sending this man into the world with his son, the Messiah, in mind. And even in the life of Zechariah and Elizabeth, God has big plans. And in the hurting, and in the wondering, in the years of why them, but why not me? And the wondering what's ever going to happen? And what's with all this hardship? Even through that time, you have a God who's listening to you and will one day say, your prayers have been heard. This is amazing news. And Zechariah responds to it by saying, how can I be sure of this? I'm old, my wife's old, and she's, you know what, we're not going to be having no kids. Aren't we people just the best? Isn't it just like a big old hug from us to God every time he talks to us? Aren't we just the best, Like, aren't we just God's like, hey, Garrett, I got the best thing for you. It's going to be your message to share with people. It's going to be an amazing thing. And you go, I don't know. Not sure if I care about that. How can I trust it? And yet, in our Christian lives, we do that to God all the time. All the time. We just scoff at his message. We just go, maybe that's true for the preacher over there, but not me. And then as a preacher, I'm going, maybe it's true for the congregation, but not me. And we just scoff at it. And Gabriel, he's got a lot of work to do at the beginning, the first chapters of Luke, so he doesn't have a lot of time for smack talk, so he's just like, I'm going to get straight to it. I'm Gabriel, okay? I stand in the presence of God. I have been sent to speak to you and tell you this good news, and now you will be silent, and you will not be able to speak until the day it happens. I'm not going to have this conversation with you any longer, because you did not believe my words, which will come true at their appointed time. God's broken his silence, but you're starting yours, pal. Have fun for the next 10 months learning from your mistake. Meanwhile, the people outside were waiting for Zechariah and wondering why he stayed in there so long, because it's just a normal little job, not supposed to be anything big or special. And when he came out, he could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the temple. And after this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant, and after 5 months, they stayed in seclusion. And Zechariah, all he had to show for it was a great big lesson to learn. And a lesson to learn from his mistake. Who's been there? You been there? And here's what's cool. Almost immediately he starts learning the lesson from this mistake. Almost immediately. Because here's the deal. The very next chapter, after this happens, there's all these rumors of an angel showing up. There's more rumors that start popping up that another person saw an angel. This young girl named Mary saw an angel. And he told her, not that you're going to be, even though you're too old to have kids, you're going to have kids. No, he told her, even though you've never slept with anybody, you're going to have a baby. And how many people in her small village do you think bought that lie? Not many. And so she ran away. You know where she ran away to? The one other person she knew of that had ever seen an angel. She went and stayed with Elizabeth and her silent husband, Zechariah. And there is something about going through things, right? Where you don't know what it's like to go through it until you go through it. And the moment you start going through it, you go, man, I wish I could be around other people that's been through it before. I was looking for a really, tight, unique way to say that, but it's not an easy way to say it. Just, you've been through it, I've been through it, let's go through it together, And when you sit with someone else who's seen an angel, and who's not going to mock you for having said, I saw an angel, who understands the confusion and the fear and the what about this and the what about that, and they could just sit there with you. You go, I know, but hey, what God says, he says, and it's going to happen. It's going to happen. You're okay. And almost immediately, Zechariah is learning from his mistake, and he's helping people not as far along the road as he is, going, hey, come in. I'll help you. I'll help you. And as parents and as people, and I hope this happens at church, by the way. I hope this happens in your home. I hope this happens at church, where you find other people who've been down the road you're going through, and they can go, hey, I know you've run into this wall, or you've made this mistake, or you've done this thing. I want to let you know I'm living proof God's not done with you. I'm living proof that God still loves you. He's still going to work with you. Don't give up now. Don't quit. I've been down the road. You're going down now. I hope you find that at church. I hope your kids can help learn from not just the good things you've done in your life, but also some of the mistakes you've made. And you can learn and say, hey, listen, I know what it's like to go through that. You're okay. Because Samuel, we've talked about the prophet Samuel, we've talked about John the Baptist and Jesus. They're all massive characters in the Old Testament. They all were given into homes of families that had a strong believer in them. And they all have this similar line that is said about them in their stories. Right here, Forgive the formatting of this slide, but okay, I know it's hard to look at. Yikes, ugly sign. But okay, here's what it says about Samuel. The boy Samuel continued to grow in stature and in favor with the Lord and with people. John the Baptist, verse 80. And the child grew and became strong in spirit, and he lived in the wilderness until he appeared publicly in Israel. Jesus, verse 52. And Jesus grew in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and with man. You notice how there's this sort of rhythm of raising kids and this hope, and there's target on the wall for raising kids saying, I have this family in my home, and my prayer is that by the time they leave my home, they've grown not just in wisdom, but also in stature, not just in stature, but in wisdom, not just in physical ability, but in knowledge. I hope they've grown in not just in the eyes of God, but in the eyes of people, not just in the eyes of people, but in the eyes of God, like this sort of hope and this goal as we raise our kids. And the idea is that as parents, we can kind of pour into the lives of our kids and say, hey, here's how you deal with what you're going through right now. When I was in college, I interned with a youth pastor named Scott. And Scott was at a church in California, but he came from a really big church in Kentucky, one of our flagship churches at the time in our movement. And the pastor of his church was a guy named Mike Breaux. Now, Mike Breaux was the closest thing to a celebrity pastor the Christian church movement had at the time. He was everywhere. People were making shirts with his face on them, that whole, like you guys do for me. You know how it works. Anyways, and so he's everywhere. He's traveling everywhere. He's speaking at every youth conference, every adult conference. He's all over the place. His church is exploding. He eventually was hired to go work at Willow Creek. He's like that level kind of guy, right? And so when you work for that kind of guy, guess what you don't want to have happen? You don't want him to be the person who shows up at your office when you do something dumb, right? But on this day, he walked into Scott's office and he sat down because Scott had done something dumb. And he goes, isn't there someone like a little more direct report I could be talking to right now? Because Scott was trying to make a point at youth group one night, and he's with all his youth group kids and all the middle schoolers. He's talking to me, he goes, hey, what would you think about me if I just went? And he said every bad word those middle schoolers knew. Just beep, 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 beep. Like just in a row, just rattle them off. And he's trying to make a point, like, hey, if that would change your opinion about me, then shouldn't that change your opinion about you? And like, if that's going to make you look at me differently, doesn't your reputation, whatever. He's trying to make a point to middle schoolers. You get it. But those middle schoolers didn't hear the point. All they heard was, beep. And they go, can you believe what Scott just said? And they all went home and told their parents and everything. And it's a big church with a lot of parents. And they came out of the woodworks going, how could you be so dumb? What are you saying to my kids? You shouldn't be. My kids don't even know those words. You need a glossary to understand what your kids say and you think they don't. Okay, whatever. All right, so, and he's getting beat down from every angle. And then the celebrity pastor walks into his room and sits down. Great. And Mike he sits down and he goes, I know what you're trying to do. I tried something kind of like that when I was a middle schooler pastor. It never works. You're okay. You're not going to get fired. Just apologize to the parents, apologize to the youth group, and this will all blow over. He got up and left. And sometimes our kids don't need us to come down on them when they do something dumb. And you and I don't need a whole bunch of people to come down on us when we do something dumb. We need someone who can sit down and go, yeah, me too. And you're going to be okay. Because that's what it looks like to help disciple people. People have been down this road. God's not done with you. And that is an important thing to remember. It's not just the times we do something dumb. It's just all the time we have these opportunities to talk with our kids. Like my son came to me the other day and goes, Dad, is it wrong to want more wisdom? Like if God's already given you wisdom and is it wrong to ask for more like you're being greedy or something? I go, what a great question. I would have never thought to think of that. And I go, no, you're always allowed to want more wisdom. There are things that Jesus gives us you're always allowed to ask for more of. You're always allowed. Like, that's why very often the wisest person you know is probably one of the oldest people you know. Because they don't just have wisdom that their daddy always told them. They do have that wisdom. They'll tell you, my dad always said, my mom always said, but they also have life experience. They've also been part of churches where they go, you know what, I have elders that would talk to me, they share wisdom with me, and I have that. I have so many conversations with Darren and Walter and Stan and Steve, and like these men, Lewis, I take them out to coffee and go, here's my question, what do you got for me? Like, there's all this wisdom that just stacks on top of each other, and you're always allowed to ask for more. Here's what Galatians says about the fruit of the Spirit. You ready? It says this: the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. And I love this last line. Are you ready? Here it is. Against such things, there is no law. That means you can't overdose on these. You can have them and have some more. It's like eating broccoli. You're not going to get, you just eat as much as you want, which is like 5 pieces, if that. But you eat as much as you want, you're not going to get sick, unless you just don't like broccoli. But that's my point, that you can't overdose on these. You can have more and more and more, and you won't get in trouble. They won't have a bad reaction in your life. And these are the things that, as you grow in your faith, these things grow in you. Isn't that cool? That as we help disciple each other in this relationship with Jesus, we grow in Jesus, and these aspects of Jesus start growing in us. Because we are learning from our mistakes, we're learning about the experience of living life with God. And Zechariah had to deal with it firsthand before the greatest man on earth would come live in his house. There's a day coming in this series where we're going to look at the Gospel of John on John the Baptist. And there's going to be this moment where Jesus starts outpacing John the Baptist. Where Jesus starts growing faster and farther and doing more than John. And all John's friends are going to come run to him. They're going to go, John, he's taking all the people. He's doing everything better than you. They're all going to him. They're not coming to you anymore. You got to do something about this. He's going to say one of the most amazing lines in the Bible. A verse that you should memorize. He's going to say, he must become greater, and I must become less. And what you find out about John the Baptist is that he was very comfortable in the shadow of Jesus. He's going, his tree must grow, and I must rest in his shade. Jesus is going to have a parable about a mustard seed. He's going to say, hey, the kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. You plant it, it's the smallest seed. It's going to grow to the biggest tree in the garden. And one of the things he says is, and birds will come, they'll nest in its limbs. He's going, your whole life is going to fit in this. I'm not going to compete with the tree. I'm going to live in the tree. I'm going to live in his limbs. And the reason, and you don't come up to that conclusion without seeing someone live it out in front of you first. I think John the Baptist learned how to live in the shadow of Jesus by watching his mom and his dad live under the guidance of God. Live under what it looks like to be a good follower of their God. And this is what happens. So we fast forward to, we were reading verses 13 is where they said the name John. Remember, you're going to call him John, verse 13. Well, now we're in like verse 60 to 65 here. You ready? John's ready to be born. The time's gone, 10 months later, and John is born, and Elizabeth goes, hey, we have a plan for this. It's all ready. This is our new boy. His name's John. And all the family members go, you can't name him John. Are you out of your mind? His dad's not named John. You don't have any family members named John. You got to do what's right by Zechariah. Name the boy Zechariah. Are you out of your mind? And they all come running to Zechariah because Elizabeth wasn't in charge of her baby's name apparently. Well, she's not. I gave the final okay with all my kids' names. Anyways, so she wanted to name Kenny Kenneth. And we didn't have a good middle name for that. And I lost sleep for a week. Luckily, he came late. Otherwise, I wouldn't have had a name for him. But I finally landed on Timothy. It's okay. Now, they all come to Zechariah. They go, Zechariah, She's trying to name a baby that's not respectful to you. They're trying to name John and not Zechariah. Assert yourself. Do something right. Come on, stand up. We're all on your side here. And he takes out a tablet because he can't talk, remember? He goes, nah. He gets the tablet out. The boy's name is John. And from that moment, immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue was set free, and he was able to speak and praise God. What happened the moment he worked through all his mistakes with God? What happened? The moment he could talk again, he worshiped and praised his God again. Because that's what it looks like to be a Christian dealing with your stuff with God. And what's amazing about the angel telling him to name his son John is that every name in the Old Testament, every name in the Bible has a meaning. They all come with a definition. And they all come to them and say, hey, Zechariah, you're supposed to name your son Zechariah. And he goes, nope, I'm going to tell you why I'm not going to name him Zechariah. Because of the meaning of John, which means God has been gracious to me. And when he held this sign up for the people in his life to see, everything changed. And if you get to the point where you can write these words on the tablet of your heart, your faith will change. Your family will change. Your worship will change. Everything as it deals with God will take a giant step forward. And as you get to the place where you can look at your life through thick or thin, through good or bad, through it all, and you can say, he has been gracious to me. It'll change everything. The Old Testament says that a day was going to come where God was not going to send his law down on tablets and 10 commands. He was not going to write it that way. But he was going to write it on their minds and in their hearts. And the question is, are you ready to take steps forward in your faith? Are you ready to take steps forward towards Jesus and live your life in the shadow of Jesus Christ? If you are, come along. Come for the ride. Let it affect your household. Let it affect your family. Let it affect your story. Let it affect your worship. Let it affect everything you do. Because we really do have a God who has been gracious to us.